Like my throat is dry, man.
We're on a tour. Orange County Ghost Walks. Anywho, first time on this tour. We're gonna see what this is about.
Welcome everyone. My name is Valerie with a V. I'm going to be your guide tonight. I'm glad you're here. This is my first tour of the year, so we're starting off strong. Just a couple things before we start. Masks are totally optional, so please do whatever makes you feel most comfortable. And as you've probably noticed, the town is a bit noisy. It can be a bit unpredictable at times. So if at any time I'm not loud enough, please let me know. But if at any time I'm way too loud and immersive, please let me know. Sound good, friends?
Yes.
All right. Well, without further ado, welcome, future ghosts. As a ghost would say, what you are, we once were. What we are, you shall be. Who here believes in ghosts? A hefty few.
Halfway.
Kind of. Well, to quote Alfred Hitchcock, ghosts believe in you. So it's only common courtesy and politeness that you return the favor. After all, I tell them people stories all the time, and they enjoy them immensely. Well, friends, everything you're about to hear tonight on this tour is true. All of the historical information comes from the city's archives, and all of the ghost stories come from first-hand interviews. So, welcome to Warrior Mansion. And here is what it used to look like back in the day. Dr. Daniel Franklin Royer sadly failed at just about everything he did. He was well educated. He was a certified teacher and later a physician, but he ended up losing both careers. And so he was really distraught, and he took his remaining savings and moved here to Orange in 1896. And here he married a widow and raised a daughter and 2 stepdaughters. His daughter would later pass away right in that upstairs room. And his wife would also fall ill, and he would refuse to treat her. He made her go all the way to Los Angeles for treatment. He wasn't a good person. And after a messy divorce, which was very rare in that time, he ended up leaving this house to his daughter. In the 1920s, the house became a mortuary, and the front actually looks a little bit different today. The columns were added, as was customary for mortuaries back then. And the porch was also built to accommodate room for the freezers for the bodies. The freezers are still there today. And if you look closely on the side there on the porch, you can see a square cutout filled in with red bricks. Well, that was once the casket door, and it made delivering the caskets a little bit easier rather than carrying them all the way through the house and down into the basement. In the 1980s, a real estate developer by the name of Gene Seacrest bought this house and converted it into individual office suites. And during the construction, he allowed 2 construction workers to stay here. And while they both chose separate living quarters, together they would experience very strange and frightening things that would make them move closer and closer together until they both ended up sharing the same tiny room right there in the front. When Gene Seacrest came to pay the men their last paycheck, he walked into that room and he found it filled with effigy candles and other objects used for the protection from evil. Often during renovations, the spirits of the deceased are disturbed and activity tends to spike. The men said that they saw the apparition of a young woman roaming the halls, and she is believed to be Royer's daughter. Today, this house still serves as office suites, and it is also the Chamber of Commerce for the City of Orange. And weird stuff still happens here to this day. One evening, there was an employee by herself downstairs, and she heard the sounds of scratching coming from the freezers. So she went to check it out, but she didn't find anything wrong. That room in the back with the stained glass windows, that was once the embalming room, and it is now a lawyer's office. And it is known for poltergeist activity when water bottles and other small objects have flown across the room. I've had the opportunity to go inside and talk to someone who works here. And he told me a few of the things that he's noticed and that he's seen with his very eyes. He said that coffee mugs that belong to his colleagues have tipped over by themselves on the desks. He's also said that photographs have fallen off of the walls and that the name plaques that are above each door have fallen down. He said they didn't just fall down, they fell down with a very heavy force. And actually, before this tour starts, and we're all waiting out front, I've had numerous people tell me on different occasions that they have seen someone looking at them from one of those upstairs windows. One person said that she could see her as we spoke, so I wanted to know, what did she look like? And so she told me that she has white hair with a bun, and she's wearing either a gray or a white blouse. So friends, off we go into the night. Keep your loved ones close. For who knows what may be lurking in the dark. Follow me. Are you missing anyone? Welcome to the Elks Lodge. You can see that it hasn't really changed at all. This building originally belonged to a different group, the Oddfellows, who were a lot like the Freemasons. And their original meeting spot was once across the street above Watson's Drugs. In the 1920s, they took out a $100,000 loan to pay to build this magnificent structure. And they finished just in time for the Great Depression. And so they couldn't pay on the loan. Excuse me, they couldn't pay on the loan, and they ended up selling this building, and they moved back over to Watson's. Well, there was an experience that happened here that was related to one of our very own guides from the doorman. The doorman said that they had once hired a dishwasher to work here late at night, cleaning up after the events, and the dishwasher knew that he would be the last person in the building. And so one night he was in the kitchen, and a well-dressed man came up to him to ask him a question. Now the dishwasher was busy, and he couldn't be bothered, and he was also wearing headphones, so he couldn't even hear the man. So he just shooed him away, and the man left. Well, later, the doorman and the dishwasher were walking down a hallway where there are photographs lined up on the wall of the former leaders. We might pause for just a moment if we can move in just a bit. Thanks, friends. They were walking down a hallway with pictures lined up on the walls of the former leaders. And the dishwasher paused, and he looked at one of the pictures and pointed to it, and he said, "That's the man who tried to talk to me." It was one of the former leaders, but he's been dead for over 20 years. Paranormal experiences have been known to occur here since the early 1970s, when this was once home to Orange Sporting Goods. Both customers and employees alike said that they could feel as though someone was watching them. They could feel something breathing down their necks, and some of them could even feel things brush up against them. Those who claim to be psychic or are physically sensitive would walk into this building and would feel the immediate urge to leave. And actually, someone on the tour, when we were still waiting over there, she asked, "Are we going to go to the Elks Lodge?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Oh, I went in there one time and I felt like I had to get out right away." And I hadn't even told her the story yet, so that definitely gave me some chills. Well, one day here, a UPS man was delivering uniforms, and he fell down the stairs. And when someone came to his aid to see if he was all right, he said, "I didn't fall down the stairs. I was pushed." Well, luckily, he landed on the uniforms, so he didn't sustain any serious injuries. And perhaps the most disturbing is that one night an employee was here by himself, and he heard a voice call over to him from the register. And it said, "Look over here." And when he did, the window next to the register shattered. So that's when Dennis bought this building, and he turned it into Chapman Antiques. Are we all pretty much familiar with how antique shops work? You can rent out cubicles and sell your items. Well, there were customers here who were interested in several items for sale, but some of them didn't seem to have any price tags on them. So Dennis would call up the dealer and he would ask about them. And the dealer insisted that he did in fact put price tags on those items just the week before, and he couldn't explain why they were missing. When the dealer retired, he ended up moving up north, and Dennis began to remove the man's items from the store. And one of the items was a very large and very heavy bolted display case that required several people to lift it. And when they did lift it and move it out of the way, there they found all of the missing price tags neatly lined up against the wall. Dennis also reported that sometimes he would leave the store and he would walk by a mirror that was on the wall. So he did that, as usual, but when he came back later that day, the mirror was lying on the ground, completely unbroken. Dennis also said that eventually he had to rope off access to the basement from the customers. He said that way too many strange things were happening down there, and he was concerned for the safety of his guests. So we don't know who is here now. People tend to come and go, but no one stays for very long. But whoever's here now might be in for a wild ride, and I wish them all the best of luck. In 1854, two Los Angeles-based attorneys owned 5,400 acres of land along Santiago Creek. They wanted to establish a town in an area with a good water supply and rich, fertile soil for the growing citrus industry. Their names were Alfred Chapman and Andrew Glassell. This was originally Richland, California. By 1873, the town had grown large enough to need a post office. So when they went to get one, they found out that there was already a Richland, California. And it's against the law to have two post offices with the same name in the same state. So the name of Orange was chosen to pay homage to Glassell's hometown of Orange County, Virginia. By 1886, as advertised on that restaurant across the street, Orange was officially incorporated into the state. And the plaza and the fountain were built. And here is a photograph of the fountain. But you might be thinking, well, that doesn't really look like this. Well, that is actually the 1937 replacement. This is the original cast iron fountain, and it lives over at the library. Has anyone seen it? It's very small, surprisingly, but it's darling. I recommend you go check it out. And another little fun tidbit about the circle is that it is illegal to drive around it more than 3 consecutive times. And that is because in the 1950s, the high school had a football game victory, and they were doing victory laps around, causing a lot of chaos. So if you're an out-of-towner, you don't have the best sense of direction. Just be careful when you're driving around and make sure you don't do it more than 3 times. Well, friends, as you can probably guess, this plaza circle has a bit of a dark history. Around the turn of the 20th century, one day, there were two young boys playing in the plaza. And one of them ran into the street, and his friend instinctively ran after him. And the two were trampled by a carriage. But after that, the business owners in the street said that they often saw two young boys dressed in knickers and suspenders playing. And when they were told to leave, the boys vanished. Now, I'm not sure if you know this, but Orange has actually been featured in a few different movies and TV shows because, ironically, it looks a bit like a backlot. And it has a very old-timey, nostalgic feel to it. Well, in 1995, the movie That Thing You Do, starring Tom Hanks, was filming here. And the production assistant came to set one morning, and she found two young boys playing in the plaza. And so she was upset that they had somehow figured out how to break into a closed set. So when she went to get the security guard to tell them to leave, and they came back, the boys were gone. So keep your eyes peeled tonight as you're driving home and watch out for any wandering souls. Are any of you here fans of American Horror Story? Yes. Well, the Chase Bank across the street was featured in season 7 as the butchery restaurant. Both Santa Ana and Orange are popular film locations for the series. We already do. Now you do. All right, friends. Well, welcome to Paisley Furniture. This picture was taken in 1905. Now, without thinking about it too much, what do you see in this picture? Horses. Something else? Feel free to shout it out. People. Oh, how interesting. Okay, well. Did anyone happen to catch the sign above the awning? Yeah. What does it say? What does it say? It's kind of blurry. It was also a morgue. It was very common then for furniture stores and mortuaries to be one and the same, because somebody had to build the coffin. And the horse that you see in the picture, not delivering furniture. It's delivering bodies. The bodies were carried right through this busy store and into the elevator and down into the basement. And there's a reason that the storefront has bay windows. Let's say a drifter was passing through town and died. Well, their bodies would be placed on display right through these windows, in hopes that somebody would be able to identify them. You see, the Victorians were obsessed with them, and displays like those often drew in quite the crowd. It was also very common then to be afraid to be buried alive, because you didn't need medical knowledge back then to declare anyone dead. There was even a safety coffin invented by George Bateson. These coffins included elaborate contraptions to save you if you were to find that you've been prematurely buried. However, they lacked a way to provide air, so being discovered quickly was paramount to survival. One of these contraptions was a bell that was placed on top of the tombstone and with a string went all the way down into the grave. And that is where we get the saying, as soon as I say you're gonna go, oh. That's coming up next, so then I'll pick on you. Saved by the bell. And someone was also stationed next to the grave to watch out for grave robbers and to wait for the call. And that is where we get the saying,
Graveyard shift.
the graveyard shift. How many people do you think were saved by the bell? A very specific number. Unfortunately, it is 0. There are no documented cases of anyone being saved. However, there was once a coffin discovered with scratch marks on the inside. George Bateson was so fearful that he himself might be buried alive. So to assure that this would never happen, he lit himself on fire. So, death back then was the business, as it is now. People died young, people died often. Funerals were often very elaborate, with parading through the streets and ornate decorations, much like now. And here's a photograph of a very elaborate Victorian funeral. So I ask you, what flower are you supposed to bring to a funeral?
Lily.
Yes, this side of the stage. And carnations. I think, don't carnations have a pretty long shelf life? Yeah. You could also say the white one. Well, yes, lilies. Lilies cover the stench of death. And when someone died, their bodies would be placed in a bed first for 24 hours to see if it would stir. And that is where we've gotten the custom of the wake. This was a furniture store and a mortuary all the way up until the 1940s, when one day a young woman came here to pay her last respects to her loved one. She boarded the elevator, but unfortunately it malfunctioned and crashed, and she was killed in the accident. But to this day, the business owners across the street and even the residents above have said that they have seen the apparition of a woman dressed in 1940s clothing.
You laugh. I saw that.
How's my volume here? Good. Yes. No, I wish. Sorry. But you know what, though? You can always come back during the day. That's what I do. If there's a place that sparks my interest, I just come back during the day. I know it's not the same, but at least you can tell it's on. Well, friends, before we talk about our next stop, I want to ask first how you all feel about seeing pictures of dead bodies.
Good.
Okay. Or as it's known as post-mortem photography. Because now might be your time to look away. But as I've said, the Victorians were obsessed with death. So imagine yourself in that era. Your loved one has just passed, and you would want to remember them as they were alive. So what do? You take one last picture of them to serve as a keepsake. The baby in this photograph is dead, and eyes were often painted onto their eyelids to make them appear lifelike. For children and infants that died, well, this may have been the only picture ever taken of them. And perhaps the most disturbing, the arm of her dead brother draped across her shoulder. You can see the visible discomfort in her eyes. Exposure times in pictures back then were really long. They were about 15 minutes. So if you moved, you might come out blurry. But it was always easy to spot the dead in a picture. They would always come out crystal clear. You may be wondering, how were they able to pose like that? Posing standing up? Well, I will tell you in due time. You know, the anticipation. With this little contraption. Death was part of everyday life for the Victorians, and their views on death were very different than ours. But perhaps after tonight, you may come to believe that death might not be so far removed as you might think. Well, if I can direct your attention across the street to the restaurant Ruta Begour's. This house was originally built in 1915 and was once home to citrus ranchers, and it is very active. An elderly woman has been spotted walking through the main dining area, and when you do a double take, she's gone. Really weird things happen there, like doors that are somehow stuck shut will randomly burst open on you when you walk by. And faucets in the kitchen will turn on by themselves in the middle of the night and will still be running the next morning when the employees arrive. And salt and pepper shakers have been known to mysteriously rearrange themselves. The owner of the restaurant was actually really worried that all of this commotion would ruin the business. But this restaurant is actually quite famous for its activity. Everyone gets along really well here. Every now and then something weird happens and it's acknowledged and life goes on. Perhaps the spirits here are the original citrus ranchers hard at work with the other employees. But just remember, the next time you're out to dinner, that empty table next to you might not be empty after all.
Oh, I unplugged myself. That's the one sweet thing.
Well, isn't this home just beautiful?
It really is.
Oh, of course. Only the best houses do. The First National Bank of Orange opened in 1905 and was managed by William Granger. And together with his family, they moved into this house, which was built just the year before. It later served as a boarding house and most recently a tea room and restaurant. The owner of the restaurant wanted to decorate with some Victorian antiques. So she went to get some, and that's when the activity started. So I ask you, if a house can be haunted, can an object also be haunted? I love the confidence. Well, the owner of the restaurant said that one day she was serving her guests and she went into the kitchen and she heard the sounds of running coming from upstairs. And so she thought that maybe somehow they had gone up to explore. So she went upstairs to investigate, and that's when she found that she was totally alone up there. There are known spirits in this house. An elderly woman, a young woman, and 2 small children. And there are also known deaths in this house. One day, a young woman was admiring the view from the balcony when she accidentally fell to her death right there in the front yard. After the restaurant closed in 2010, this building stood vacant for a while, and residents across the street said that they often saw the face of a smiling woman looking at them from the upstairs window. Does everyone know what EVP stands for? V as in Valerie. EVP, and if you do, shout it out. Electronic voice phenomenon.
Yes.
Well, an EVP session was conducted by the Orange County Paranormal Society, and they captured the sounds of laughter and playing coming from inside. Perhaps these are the spirits of the 2 children that have passed away in this house. Chapman University eventually bought this, and they turned it into an alumni house, and all of the objects were taken out. And they were asked, does the activity still continue? And their response was, no comment. So, fun little fact, those windows up there, above the big window, if that made any sense at all, I've been told that that is the original glass on that building. So, that's a fun little thing you can dazzle your friends with. Thank you. Friends, our next stop is going to be at Wahoo's Fish Tacos. But we're not going to stop there on the off chance that there are still people eating there. We don't want to gather and make them feel uncomfortable. and it's just kind of an awkward place to stop in general. So take a gander at Wahoo's. We'll keep walking down the sidewalk. We'll turn the corner around the brick building and we'll stop there. Sound good? Good. We just passed the Vineland Hotel. Dr. W.F. Bailey built this 14-room hotel as an extension to his home in 1884. It was the first hotel of Orange, and it's one of the oldest structures in the city. This building behind me was once a church, and a fake wall was built, which extended all the way from here down to the corner where we met, which completely covered the Vineland. I believe it was an attempt to make this building appear larger than it actually was. And when you walked through the hotel and out onto what was once the front porch, you would still be standing inside another building. From the street's view, you couldn't even tell that the Vineland was even there. The hotel was eventually abandoned due to lack of care and upkeep, but that gave us a chance to do another EVP session. And they captured the sounds of muffled conversations coming from one of the rooms above. It would seem as though the guests love it here so much and didn't want to leave. They also captured the sounds of the whinny of a horse in the kitchen. During the renovations, they built on an extension which included a kitchen. And they built it where the horses' stables used to be. So the sounds they heard were from horses who've been dead for over 100 years. Welcome to the American Legion building. In the 1920s, there was a plethora of architectural styles, and this 1928 Mediterranean-style building was built and dedicated to all the men and women who served in World War I. As with most American Legion buildings, it contains a bar, and the bartender here has said, "It is very haunted here." He said that when he's by himself, he can hear the sounds of voices coming from all around him. It would seem as though the former members are unaware that their dues are up. He's also said that table settings for events have been rearranged by themselves. The former leader here is afraid of this building, and he won't go upstairs, because that's another area known for its poltergeist activity. Now, I hear that you can rent out this building for events, and I also hear that it comes at a really great price. But just remember, you might have more guests arrive than you originally anticipated.
It's a ghost. Pushing the garbage. Right from the end.
Well, friends, how are you enjoying the tour so far?
Great.
Great. Well, how are you enjoying all the history? Well, I have some fun tidbits. I actually learned one just the other night from watching a TV show from like 2001. So I'm excited to tell you it's the big debut of that little tidbit, which isn't really that interesting, but it is. I'm excited. All right. So, take a look here. This Starbucks behind me was once the old newspaper building. And if you stood on the roof and pointed a camera down this alley, we'd be standing in this very spot. This was the loading dock for Eileen and Grote General Store, and these are its delivery boys. You can see the remnants of the awning and the flat roof top of the fence over there. And there's someone believed to be in this photograph, but we're not really sure if he's in it, so don't look too closely, but he might be. And he was known for his beautiful singing voice. And so he moved to Los Angeles to pursue his dreams. His name was William Boyd, or as you might know him by the name of Hopalong Cassidy, the singing cowboy. He was once a resident of Orange. And I just learned that the very first TV character to ever be put on a lunchbox was Hopalong Cassidy. So now you can dazzle your friends. Well, I have another fun little tidbit that I learned. So this building over here was once a theater. Do you remember when we were walking, I lost my train of thought. It was after the furniture store. There's the big white church on the corner. It used to be a theater with the big marquee. Well, when that came into town, it actually put this theater out of business. The original part of the theater is the white portion, and the addition is the brick portion. And so when we go down the alley and turn to the right, look at the front of the building and see if you can find the original entrance. It'll be fun. Welcome to Antique Depot. Most of the activity that occurs here happens in the basement, and most of the activity happens with the employees. Well, one night, an assistant manager was here by herself, and she was vacuuming some of the floors downstairs. And she saw something from one of the cubicles fly out into the aisle. And so she stopped and she looked, and she saw a record fly out, followed by another, and another, and another. So she turned off her vacuum and she bravely went to investigate. And when she got into the cubicle, she found that all of the records had been individually taken out of their crates and were neatly fanned out onto the ground. It was as if someone was examining the collection. Interesting things happen here, like items that have been mistakenly placed under lock and key will be mysteriously found right back where they belong the next morning. And pictures will fall off of the walls and will float down without breaking. Are any of you here antique collectors? Well, you might not be after this, or you might want to do it even more. Well, it is believed that the spirit of the person who once owned these objects can become embedded in it. Its energy can be trapped inside. It might not always be a happy thing. So the next time you're antique shopping and you find something you like, hold it in your hand first for a moment to see if it has a good energy about it. Because the spirit of the person who once owned that object might have a fondness for it. It might want to come visit it, and you. Well, friends, if I can direct your attention across the street to the building with the blue and white striped awning, that is Lollipop Nail Studio, as advertised. But it was also the first motorcycle shop of Orange. And in this picture, there is an employee by the name of Bertie Claypool. Now, Bertie was in the shop one night by himself, and the lantern that he was holding accidentally fell onto the oil and gasoline-soaked floor. And the shop burst into flames, and he perished in the fire. But to this day, there have been people who have said that they have seen the apparition of a man on fire. They've even said that they've smelled smoke and that they've seen flames out of the corners of their eyes. This is most likely a residual haunting, not an intelligence, because you cannot interact with it. Sometimes when an event as traumatic as this occurs, its energy can become imprinted at the site, replaying itself over and over again, like a record player skipping in time. Renovations have been done to that building a lot. You can actually see the remnants of the fire at the top. But after all their efforts, they still cannot get rid of the smell of the smoke. And sometimes you can even smell it next door at Antique Station. But that doesn't make any sense because that building wasn't built until the 1950s. You can see in this picture, there's nothing next to the motorcycle shop. So, the next time you're at Antique Station and you smell something, don't be so quick to pull the fire alarm, because you might be dealing with something else. Well, friends, I want you to take a look at the sun-kissed building at the corner there. We won't stop. We'll just keep going around the corner and so on and so forth.
Oh,
Sunkiss?
building.
Which one is that, the white one?
Maybe this is on the corner.
Over there.
It's not an official stop. That's where we don't stop. Can you hear me okay without?
Yeah.
I just see my face. Away from digging. So the Sunkist building was once, I don't know how to describe. The Sunkist building was once an art gallery. And the only way that you knew that it was in operation was the owner would put out a purple flag at the front gate. And that was the only advertisement. So if you knew. Well, friends, we have time for one more stop. Welcome to El Ranchito Restaurant. As you can probably tell, this was once a church. And it suffered structural damages in the Long Beach earthquake of 1933. The top of it actually tumbled down completely, and the renovations ended up going way over budget. But I'm glad they did it because this is one of my favorite buildings ever. And the floors inside are still raked. So if you ever go inside, check it out. It's also really lovely, so it's just a win-win. Well, the general manager here has reported hearing the sounds of pots and pans crashing and shaking on their own in the kitchen when she's the first person inside in the morning. And both customers and employees alike have said that they have seen shadow figures in the main dining area. Shadow figures are interpreted to be spirits in the forms of patches of shadow. There was once a family who came out to dinner here, and the child in the family wanted to assert his independence and use the bathroom on his own. But after he had been in there for quite some time, his father went to check on him. And when he got in there, he found his child cowering in the corner. Something had terrified him. And when his father asked what was wrong, his child said, "I do not want to play with the little girl." It seemed as though this restaurant has an added bonus. A young ghostly girl for children to play with while they dine. This tour in Orange has been going on for over 10 years now, and we have had people on the tour who have had paranormal experiences on their own. And a lot of them have had paranormal experiences at some of the very sites that we have visited. There have been a few different instances that have happened here, all of them in the bathroom. One guest said that when she was in the bathroom, she heard the sounds of running back and forth and giggling and the faucet turning on and off, the doors opening and closing. And so she looked to see if anyone was in there, but she didn't see anyone. So when she got back to her friend, she asked her, "Did anyone from our go while I was inside?" And her friend said, "No, you were the only one in there." Two guests on some of my tours have had experiences. One of them said that when they were washing their hands, they went up to the sink and they found wadded up paper towels, making a complete circle around the faucet. And so she thought that somehow they were playing a prank. So she started to throw away the paper towels, and it wasn't until after this tour did she know anything about this restaurant. And the last one was, they had gone up to the sink to wash their hands, and the countertop was flooded. So they went out to an employee to let them know the countertop was flooded. And the employee said, "Okay, thank you. Did you see the little girl?" I mean, if anyone said that to me. Anyway. And I've noticed that within the past few months, interesting things have been happening here, and it seems to be ramping up a bit. One night, actually in the fall, we do 2 tours a night sometimes because of the busy season. So the second tour ends at about 11:30. And so at that time of night, the lights are off, nobody's there, nobody's in the town. And when I was telling this story, we were all standing here, someone said that she watched a little ball of shadow going across the sidewalk at the very bottom. And she said, you know, there were no cars there, no people, no lights. And another group, when we were walking down the sidewalk there to cross the street, she said that she felt someone bump her. And so she turned to say, oh, I'm so sorry. But no one was there. And the last one I have debunked, but it did scare the living daylights out of me. There was a group standing about here, and they were looking in at that first window. And after everyone had gone, they said, it looks like somebody's holding up a cell phone and going up and down like this. So of course we all stood there for a minute and looked. And sure enough, I saw it. It went up and down like that. Oh, it scared me. But you can tell if you look, I think there's a computer screen that's facing us. But, oh, you stole my heart. Anyway, lots of fun things there. We should go there. Right? That was my thought after I heard this story. I actually wanted to go here just to see if anything would happen. And I went to the bathroom and nothing happened, so I don't know. I was a little bummed out. But I don't know if I would want to see anything. Anyway, I digress. The history of this building is actually very well known and very well documented. So whatever is happening here is most likely not associated with the building itself, but it might be associated with the land that it was built on, or maybe an object that was brought in. Perhaps another haunted antique. Well, friends, this is where I leave you. But before we end, do any of you have any questions or comments about anything you heard tonight? That's okay.
Where are we?
Yeah. The number one question that we get. So I will guide you. And actually, fun thing, when I was learning this tour, I had to come here by myself and walk it because I don't have the best direction, and I was timing myself too. And so I'm, seeing how long it takes, and someone saw a sticker on my water bottle and she wanted to talk to me, and I wanted to say, I'm on a time limit here. Anyway, that was a pointless story, but I will help with this. Anyway, if you enjoyed this tour, I highly recommend you check out our other tours. We have a whole gaggle of them. Some of them, I think Santa Ana is starting up soon, I hope, and then the Kellogg House too is starting up again. So
There's a Fullerton one.
and if you enjoyed what you heard tonight, a gratuity for the living is appreciated. Please drive safely. We don't want any more ghosts on the tour. Thank you, friends, so much.